The golden light under the canvas and the dust and smells of the old circus are gone. But the acts are still pretty much the same. Oh, sure, there have been some changes. But the circus is still the greatest show on earth. And to have a circus, you have to have clowns.
I mean, because cameras you can use for all across London, they're not unique to outer London. So.
Come on, even no.
Ultra-low emission zone expansion is a key element of your budget. So despite the huge public backlash, despite the legal challenge from across and beyond London, despite opposition from within your own party, are you still confident that ulez expansion will go ahead as timed on the 29th of August?
So Chair, polemic from the Assembly is okay, but decent answers from the Mayor aren't. I'm quite clear.
Where was the polemic, Mr. Mayor? That was a very reasonable question.
I'm quite clear that toxic air is a matter of life and death. It leads to around 4,000 premature deaths a year. Children with stunted lungs, adults with a whole host of health issues from asthma to cancer, dementia to heart disease, directly linked to air quality. I think delay is not an option. Delay is akin to denial.
So that's, yes, you are confident that it will go ahead as planned on the 29th of August, is that correct?
I'm confident that we'll be expanding ulez at the end of August, and I'm also confident that we'll see further progress in relation to cleaning up our air. There's 5 million Londoners currently missing out to have the same benefits the 4 million Londoners received with the ulez central and inner London expansion.
Well, let's perhaps explore some of the opposition. So several London Labour MPs have now called on you to pause or delay the rollout of ulez expansion, including Seema Malhotra, Shadow Business Minister, and an MP from within my constituency, who said that it would have a disproportionate impact on low-income Londoners and small businesses. Federation of Small Business Research previously showed that 18% of small businesses affected by ulez expansion say they will have to close. What does your research show about the impact ulez expansion will have on small businesses in London?
Well, the report that was published in November set out the impact assessment undertaken. I've not got the report with me, but it's more than 100 pages. And that report set out not simply the responses to the consultation, but also the impact in relation to this. I'd make this point. The FSB have been consistent in opposing the ulez. The FSB, to give them credit, opposed this policy in 2017 when I first announced it, when it happened in 2019, and then when I planned the expansion to inner London. So I don't criticise them for being consistent. At least they're honest. I just wish others were honest about their opposition to clean air as well.
Maybe I rephrase the question. How many small businesses in London will close as a result of your policy to expand the ulez?
Well, I think we've got to be careful about speculation, because the same people that speculated pubs would close when you banned smoking in public places in 2006 are proved wrong. The same people that said live music venues and concert halls would close because of banning public space in 2006 were wrong. The same people, by the way, who said if you pay a national minimum wage, businesses would go bust, were proved wrong. The consistency is all those things were backed by, but were also opposed by the Tories.
It sounds to me like you haven't actually done any forecasting on the economic impact of your policy on small businesses in London. But it's not just within London. The economic impacts of this policy will be felt far beyond the bounds of the city. And you frequently talk about actions being taken in London reverberating elsewhere in the country. And that's very true. So I received an email from a carpenter in Havant recently. He said he spent years building up his business in London, but as he says, ulez will end this. So what research have you done about the economic impact of ulez expansion on small businesses beyond the capital?
Well, you'd have thought, Chair, if somebody was genuinely concerned, and I've given the benefit of the doubt with those who aren't in London, he'd be listening to my calls this morning in lobbying the government for financial support, not just to London, but for those in the southeast, including the businesses that the member claims to support. Why is it that this government, by the way, we spend more than £500 million in vehicle excise duty to the government, aside from the £42 billion net to the Treasury? Why is it the government's given funding to scrappage schemes and businesses in Birmingham, in Bath and in Portsmouth, but not to businesses in London and the southeast. And what the member is saying is Londoners should subsidise the businesses outside of London rather than the government. That can't be right.
You said earlier that national government should be our first port of call. Well, actually, no. My first port of call is you, Mr. Mayor. This is your policy. The economic consequences will be as a result of that. I think ULEZ expansion will have a devastating impact on low-income Londoners, on small businesses in outer London and beyond. Given the huge cross-party public concern around your expansion plans, given the request to delay this scheme from your own MPs, will you finally listen to Londoners and cancel these damaging plans?
ULEZ, one of our rare moments of agreement, Mr. Mayor, was in last July when I asked you about the difficulty of people in outer London switching from cars to other forms of transport in the way that had happened in inner London and central London. And you agreed with me that it was more difficult and therefore you couldn't assume the policy outcome would be the same. And clearly some of my colleagues in other parties have picked up this same fairly obvious point. The income that's in your budget that's coming in from the outer London ULEZ expansion, can that be ring-fenced? Is there a plan to ring-fence that for improvements in those areas where that revenue is coming from?
Sure, I know it's ring-fenced for public transport. You ask a more specific question about, can I come back to you on that in relation to whether it's possible?
No, and I'll tell you why not. It's because this consultation has been going on now for nearly a year. You've had a very long time to think about it. Sure, but your thought process, Mr. Mayor, about how this expansion will work, you've had a very long time to think about it, and if you were minded to prioritise that money in outer London, wouldn't you already have thought of it? Surely it's not me just now for the first time suggesting it.
No, because it's finite. It's not going to be infinite. So if the way you fund public services, you've got to make sure there's a recurring funding coming in. If, for example, only for 2 years, do we have net money coming in? Because after 2-3 years, the calculation is, according to the business plan, that no more money comes in from the ULEZ expansion. You can't really sensibly, in a prudent way, plan for a bus contract for 7 years when you've only got money coming in from a ULEZ expansion for 3 years. So that's the simple reason why. I was trying to be generous to you and say I'm happy to go away and look into this, but if you don't want me to, I won't look into it.
Well, what I'm suggesting, Mr. Mayor, is that I think it is revealing that you haven't already looked into it. Let me just reiterate my question. So the revenue from the ULEZ expansion is going to disproportionately come from outer London. To take two boroughs, for example, Croydon and Sutton, very dear to my heart, but many others. They already get less money from City Hall than inner London boroughs, and they already have less transport opportunities and infrastructure than inner London. So this is a new plan of yours that will specifically impose a cost on those boroughs, and I'm saying why don't you earmark the revenue, whatever it is, over whatever period that is raised in outer London? Why haven't you got a plan to spend that money disproportionately or entirely in the places where it's being paid?
Already discussed the additional public transport coming to outer London this year and next year. We are keen to improve public transport in outer London. We've got plans to do so. We're currently speaking to the government, for example, in another part of London in relation to the DLR extension. We continue to try and lobby the government for support for an extension of the Sutton Croydon tram. In the meantime, we will try and increase, and we will increase bus provision in outer London.
Sure. Well, this bus provision thing, I've crunched the numbers. I make it 0.21%. So it sounds like 1 million extra kilometres of buses sounds like a lot, but the thing about outer London is that it is very big. And so 1 million extra kilometres doesn't actually amount to very much. It amounts to, by my reckoning, about 1/5 of 1% of the amount of buses that are already there. It is not going to transform people's lives. Why don't you ring-fence the income from the ULEZ expansion in outer London to spend in outer London?
Chair, that was the first answer I gave, and the members said, no, you can't go away and look into it because you should already have an answer. Well, you can't have it both ways.
But what?
I think as the Mayor said, if you're going to look at a bus, you have to fund it for 7 years. And I think we've had discussions around this table before about the ULEZ income is expected to be very, very small in 7 years' time. And so ULEZ income absolutely is there to invest in public transport, but it's not something that is going to provide additional bus routes across a 7-year contract.
But Mr. Mayor, why is it? I mean, you're aware that there's a lot of opposition in outer London, cross-party. It would be an obvious way to help to diffuse that, to say that the money that it raises will be spent in Outer London. Why don't you make that commitment?
Chair, let me go back a few minutes. What I said was the monies net we're going to bring in is going to be used for public transport, as TfL have said. I'm more than happy to go away and look into whether we can have some of this money specifically earmarked for Outer London. What I do know is we already have specific monies earmarked for Outer London. The member didn't like the answer, and now we're back full circle to where we began 5 minutes ago.
No, we're not, because so what happens with TfL's budget is that hardly any of it goes to Sutton, relatively little of it goes to Croydon, and the same is true across the whole ring of Outer London, particularly in the south of London where there is no tube. So it's an obvious question, and the fact that you haven't even thought about it, and the offer that you had just now was not actually that it would be earmarked for Outer London, but that some of it would be earmarked for Outer London, which I would suggest, you know, if you take 3p of it and spend it in Outer London, you could argue you've met that commitment. That's such a low commitment. Why don't you earmark the money that you're raising from Outer London with this new charge on Outer London so that it goes to the transport in Outer London? So instead of increasing buses by 0.21% and pretending that that's a big thing, maybe you could increase it by slightly more. Maybe you could reach a whole round percent.
Well, let me give you some examples of investment in public transport in Outer London in the recent past. The extension of Bark and Riverside was in Outer London. The new DLR trains that are coming from January, that I saw the first of a couple of months ago, will primarily serve Outer London. The Elizabeth line that goes from outside of east of London to the counties that are now upset about the ulez expansion to the west to Reading benefit a lot of places in Outer London, and I could go on with other examples as well in relation to the additional kilometres of buses that we have announced. Some of the announcements in relation to the cycle schemes benefit Outer London. So it's not.
You'll appreciate in your big laundry list that I was happy to let you give out, not one of them was in or anywhere near my constituency. So when they say, Mayor's hitting us with this charge, what's he doing to compensate? The honest answer is nothing. Is that right?
I think when the member asked his question, he actually, to give him credit, mentioned the additional buses in Croydon and Sutton, but he said they're not enough. There's two.
Well, to be clear, I mean, so for example, as Assemblymember Pigeon was pointing out earlier, alongside your very undramatic 0.21% increase in buses, that's a net tiny increase. Part of that includes cuts. So there are cuts on buses in Outer London. There's a bus in Sanderstead that's being cut from 3 an hour to 2 an hour, for example. This is the kind of service that people enjoy in my constituency. Why don't you ring fence the money from ULEZ that is coming from Outer London to spend it in Outer London?
Chair, that literally is the same question I was asked a few minutes ago, and I'll give the same answer if it helps, which is at the moment the plan is for the next 2-3 years, when there's net money coming in from the ULEZ expansion, to use that for public transport across London. I'm happy to go away. It was an offer declined. To see if there's any specific part of that we can use for Outer London, and the member said he didn't want me to do that, and so I said I wouldn't do that. But if he wants me to go and do that, I'm happy to go and do that.
Okay, I think the message is that new tax being imposed on Outer London is going to be spent disproportionately in Inner London, just as TfL's budget currently is. Thank you, Chair.
Was that a question, Chair?
I think most Assembly members have been making closing statements to the questions, and I think that's fine. I let one side do it, I'm going to let the other side do it, so I think that's fine. He's made a point, and we'll leave it at that. The next is Assembly Member Fortune, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting. I want to carry on with the theme from my colleague, because revenue is an important part of this, and what's been suggested here is that the ULEZ revenue falls away after 2 years. But of course, we know what's happening now is that they're starting consultations on road user charging. So there's another model coming in after those couple of years to whack drivers again, especially after a lot of them have taken on some probably extra debt to exchange up their cars. Because revenue is really the driver of a lot of this, if you excuse the pun. The Mayor's fond of using, it struck me earlier, he's fond of using the analogy of banning smoking in pubs. Well, this isn't the same. Right? This is the Mayor saying, right, you can't smoke in pubs, unless you pay me £12.50, then you can smoke in a pub. Yeah. And by the way, you can only buy the cigarettes off of me. Because that's what's happening with this ULEZ scheme. And it's that sort of procurement issue I want to have a look at here, because the JR is currently in process, and I'll ask for an update on that in a minute. But one of the elements of that JR was this principle of predetermination, that this was always going to happen, and the consultation was a farce. And those consultation responses that were removed or not counted it was always going to be the way that it was going to land in the direction that the Mayor wanted it. So the cameras that are going to be used for this camera extension for this new tax, when were they procured?
Chair, this was a question asked a couple of days ago, and I've asked TfL to respond to the Budget and Performance Committee.
Would you be surprised if they were procured before the decision was taken?
I'd be surprised if they weren't. I mean, because cameras you can use for all across London, they're not unique to out London. So
Come on, even no. Says it all.
So how early do you think would be reasonable for them to be procured? Before the consultation started?
Chair, I simply don't know, but I've asked TfL to respond to the Budget and Performance Committee, and I'm sure they will in due course.
So remind me when the consultation started. What was the month that it started?
I think in summer, but I can check the month it was starting.
July. So if the cameras were procured before July, before the consultation started, that would suggest that the plan was always to roll this out, no matter what the response from the consultation was.
We're talking hypotheticals here.
We're not. We're talking about when were the cameras procured, and of course I know when they were procured.
So,
yeah, good man.
So,
Give a wave, you curmudgeon.
Hang on.
You haven't.
I was asked a couple of days ago to ask TfL to give the information. I've asked TfL to provide the information.
I think you'll find it's probably around April. I think you'll find they've probably been sitting in a shed since about April-ish. But I'll wait for your official answer, and then I know the public will reflect on that purchase of the cameras before the consultation was even completed. Let's move to the scrappage scheme now. Do you know how much of the scrappage scheme has been applied for, and are there any concerns that it's not going to be sufficient?
Detail of how much has been applied for, but I do know it's nowhere near the £110 million.
So you have no concerns that that scrappage scheme is going to run out of money?
The history from the previous scrappage scheme, I've got the numbers here, is I did increase it on 3 occasions. So as I said in the past, it's always kept under review. I think the last scrappage scheme, I increased it on 3 occasions. This scrappage scheme is £110 million, almost double the size of the scheme that we ended with last time. I'll have to wait and see in relation to what my review entails, but at various stages in the future, maybe we'll review it.
Finally, moving to that, what's happening with the JR? My colleague asked you the other day if there'd been any preparations around should that result come out in the way that you don't want it. What preparations have you made to possibly delay the extension of the camera network?
As you'd appreciate, the TFO is often judicially reviewed, very seldom successfully, but we can't delay things and stop things happening because somebody brings a judicial review. There are lots of loops to go through before the substantive hearing, before judgment, and then there's appeals and so forth and so forth. So there are no contingency plans in relation to our decision to extend the ulez by the end of August this year.
Let's be objective, right? So one thing that this discussion has done is it has made people consider where there's air pollution, and one of the things we've been saying is that you have to tackle that pollution where it is, not tax people where it isn't. So you've got not just fairness, but you've got proper outcomes and solutions. There's a debate going on about that now. People are now really thinking about, okay, how do I transition my vehicle from being perhaps where it's a bit polluting to where it's long-term less damaging to the environment. People are talking about this now. People are talking about the bus networks. They're talking about the infrastructure. Isn't it a sensible time, now that conversation is going on, to even pause it for a year? Just stop, just give people time. Why not do that? And there's people have asked for that, Unions have asked for it, Labour MPs have asked for it. Why not do that? What's stopping that?
I think what we're seeing in slow motion is what we saw with the climate change debate, where deniers become delayers. And we saw the same thing, by the way.
That's an unfair charge, and I won't accept that, because you're accusing me of being a climate denier, and I categorically say that's not the case. I'm asking you about the rollout of a policy.
Hang on. Let the Mayor answer the questions, Sabrina Fortune.
And I heard the same things both in 2005, 2006, when it came to banning smoking in public places. Why not just delay it? What's the urgency? Yeah, I know Roy Castle's died, second-hand smoking. We know there's evidence that second-hand smoking is dangerous, but just delay it, kick the can down the road. The same arguments were made when I said I was going to bring forward the ultra-low emission zone. The previous mayor, if you remember, didn't just bury away a report in 2013 that showed that there were more than 400 schools in areas that were unlawful. He announced in 2015 he'd bring it in 2021. Let's just kick it down the road. Let's just delay it. You know, I think the cost of inaction far outweigh the cost of action, and I think the benefits to both the climate, to the air, and to congestion, you know, when we do the ulez, far exceed the costs of inaction.
Gish gallop and obfuscation, it's nonsense. And we're getting to the same answer, which is, and he used the analogy again, you can smoke in a pub as long as you buy the cigarettes off me.
You understand politics, you think you understand political parties. You're all full of crap. You don't know what the Illuminati is. If you're Republican or you're Democrat, you're wrong. Why? It's this easy. It's called divide and conquer. That's why there's two parties and only two. And they're controlled by the same people at the very top who belong to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberger Group. They also belong to the Trilateral Commission, and you people don't even know what the hell that is. But if you did know, you would know that these are the people that control your world by making global policies that you never vote on, and by which parties both serve and belong to these organizations and control your world.
We all float down here, and you will too. In fact, they all float. They all.
Now, here's how it works. Really easy. Divide and conquer can only work if the people that are divided are not aware of the falsely created division. If you're not aware of it, then it works. If you know about it, then it don't work no more. If you have socialism without capitalism, it becomes communism. If you have capitalism without socialism, it becomes fascism. And it's just that easy. I love you. That's all you need to know. That's why Masonic symbols are all over your freaking money. But you don't pay any attention. Ridiculous.
We all float down here, and you will too.